This is my environmental science project on economics and urbanization. It's chapters 15.4, 15.5, and 15.6. So, natural resource accounting. The biggest thing here is CBA, cost benefit analysis. This analysis assigns values to the communal and environmental effects of a public project. For example, using CBA, one can determine whether it makes sense to take on public projects such as roads, dams, or airports. Okay, so how to analyze the costs and benefits. The decision maker looks at all the possible effects that a certain project may have. They count up the monetary value of all the benefits of a project, they count up the monetary value of all the costs of a project, and if the value of the benefits outweigh the value of the cost, then they proceed with the project. Some people point out that a flaw with CBA when it comes to public projects and making decisions is that it tends to value environmental costs a lot less than monetary costs and benefits. Okay, so roads, dams, and airports, all three of these things have a cost and they also have a benefit, and it's up to the decision makers to decide whether it's worth it to build these roads, dams, and airports. Using CBA, they can figure it out. So, for example, building roads may have a negative impact on the environment because they intrude on animals' habitats, and they promote the use of cars and trucks, which causes pollution. So the CBA, it's up to the decision makers to put a value on that cost, on the cost of intruding on animals' habitats, and then they also look at the monetary benefit of having people go on these roads, paying tolls and stuff, and they determine that the benefit outweighs the cost to build roads. So we have a lot of roads. And then for dams, the cost of dams is that they worsen the impact of climate change, and they also release greenhouse gases. They destroy habitats, increase sea levels, and waste water. But the decision makers determine that the value of the benefits outweigh the value of the cost. And the same goes for airports. Airports and airplanes can cause greenhouse gas emissions. They also cause noise pollution, waste, and congestion. Yeah, once again, the decision makers determined that the benefit outweighs the cost. So, CBA on roads, dams, and airports. The decision makers of our world analyze the costs and the benefits of building roads, dams, and airports. Although all the costs mentioned above of building these sites seem detrimental, using CBA, the decision makers came to the conclusion that the benefits outweigh the costs. The roads allow for easier travel across the country, which could be better for the economy. The airports allow easier travel across the country as well. Dams store water, provide renewable energy, and prevent floods. It is also the responsibility of these decision makers to decide what to do about biodiversity loss, air pollution, and climate change. So, a CBA example that I have here is reducing air pollution. You could see in that chart, in the graph, it's you see that to the left, you could see that you could see the cost and benefit of removing pollution. So if the amount of pollution prevented is low, then the cost will be low also, and then the cost will be low, and the benefit will be high, monetarily speaking. So it's not to remove just a little bit of pollution won't cost a lot of money. So, but it's also not worth it because then you don't you don't you're not able to remove as much pollution as you would like to. The whole goal here is to remove the optimal amount of pollution. So if you only remove a little, yeah, the cost is low, but you won't be able to remove the pollution. So the optimum point, as you can see on the graph, PO, where the dotted line goes up, the optimum point is when the cost and the benefit outweigh each other. This is the best amount of pollution to remove to combine an optimal removal of pollution as well as minimal monetary cost. So it's the point where there's not going to be a significant cost. The cost will not outweigh the benefits, but still it's the most amount of pollution able to be removed where the cost does not outweigh the benefit. That's what the optimum point is. Okay, so accounting for natural resources. When analyzing the cost and the benefit of a project, it is important to account for the value of natural resources, which, as I mentioned before, some critics of CBA would say that they do a bad job of accounting for the value of natural resources. If they are accounted for, it will lead to sustainable resource use because it can put a value on long-term intangible goods that are necessary. So the way you do this is you have to internalize external costs. So externalizing costs is the act of disregarding or discounting resources or goods that contribute to producing something, but for which the producer does not actually pay. For example, when a farmer harvests crops in the fall, values of soil lost to erosion, among other factors, may be disregarded. It is important to internalize these external costs. So, internalizing costs is to make sure that those who reap the benefits of resource use also bear the external cost. Therefore, it is important to calculate the value of ecological services, such as soil formation, recreation, or nutrient cycling. Okay, so measures of wealth. The value of nature's services account for $33.3 trillion, one half of the world's GDP. So GDP is gross domestic product. It's a widely used measure of wealth, and it's based on rates of consumption and throughput. It does not, but something that's wrong with GDP is that it does not account for natural resource depletion or ecosystem damage. Whereas GPI, Gross Progress Index, it takes into account real per capita, quality of life, distributional equity, natural resource depletion, environmental damage, and the value of unpaid labor. HPI is also another measure of wealth. It's Human Development Index. It tracks social progress, so it incorporates life expectancy, educational attainment, and standard of living. The benefit of the other measures of wealth, such as GPI, is that it takes environmental issues into account when it comes to the economy. Using this measure shows that the environmental issues are just as, if not more important than the economy. So, trade, development, and jobs. Moving on to chapter 15.5. So ways to expand our resources and to raise our standards of living. The ways you could do that are through trade, microlending, and jobs. So trade. Trade is valuable because it offers natural resources and products to countries who don't have easy access to them. GATT and WTO are trading systems that regulate credit, currency exchange, shipping rates, and commodity prices. Microlending. $17 billion a year are loaned by the World Bank to developing countries. Environmental effects of these loans. So the environmental effects of these loans is that the loans often go to corrupt governments. So when the loan by the World Bank goes to corrupt government, it often is used for nuclear power plants, which is very bad for the environment. And this is why microlending, as opposed to these loans by the World Bank, is important. Microlending is where the loans go directly to the companies and businesses in need rather than to potentially corrupt governments. Okay, so the effect of climate change on the economy. Sir Nicholas Stern predicted that the damage caused by climate change would be equivalent to losing 20% of the world GDP every year. Market forces are the best way to transition to a low-carbon economy, taxing consumers for emitting carbon. Another option to transition to a low-carbon economy is the cap-and-trade system. The cap-and-trade system is where an upper limit is set on the amount a given business or other organization might produce, but which allows further capacity to be bought from other organizations that have not used their full allowance. Okay, so green business and green design. Now we're moving on to chapter 15.6. Green businesses that have a green design are businesses that recognize that it is necessary to green enterprises that produce environmentally and socially sound products. It is necessary to use green enterprises that produce environmentally and socially sound products. Some of the businesses that adopted this green design include The Body Shop, Patagonia, Aveda, Malden Mills, and Johnson & Johnson. So the principles of the green design is that these businesses don't introduce hazardous materials into the air, water, or soil. They measure prosperity by how much natural capital we can accrue in productive ways. They measure productivity by how many people are gainfully and meaningfully employed. They measure progress by how many buildings have no smokestacks or dangerous effluents. They make the thousands of complex government rules that currently regulate hazardous material unnecessary. They produce nothing that will require constant vigilance from future generation. They celebrate the abundance of biological and cultural diversity, and they live on renewable solar income rather than fossil fuels. So, green design is beneficial to both the environment and the economy. Energy efficient designs such as natural lighting in the workspace promote employee well-being and productivity. Studies show that only 0.1% of all large-scale job layoffs in the United States were a result of environmental regulations. So one of the critiques with implementing this green design is that it'll lead to job layoffs because it will require less jobs. But this study showed that really that's only 0.1% of all large-scale job layoffs. Green businesses offer more jobs than other businesses. For example, wind energy provides 5 times as many jobs than does coal-fired power plants. And that's the end. Go green or go home.